In this reflection, we turn our attention to the relationship between Yeshua and the Torah. This is a theme that is often misunderstood, not least because later Christian language has shaped the way many people read the texts. Many have been taught to think that Yeshua represents a break, a new path, or even an abolition of the law. But when the Gospels are read within their historical and Jewish context, a very different picture emerges. Yeshua lived and taught in a world where the Torah was the very foundation of religious, social, and ethical life. It was not merely a collection of rules, but a way of life, a gift meant to shape a people in justice, compassion, and responsibility. To read Yeshua apart from this reality is to miss something essential. When he says that he has not come to abolish the Torah, but to fulfill it, he is using language that resonates deeply with Jewish interpretive tradition. Fulfillment here does not mean bringing something to an end, but bringing it to its purpose. It is not primarily about prophetic predictions being checked off, but about the deeper intention of the Torah being realized in lived reality. This becomes clear when Yeshua takes specific commandments and allows them to echo beyond their literal wording. The commandment against murder becomes more than a prohibition of physical violence. It addresses how people relate to one another through words, attitudes, and inner contempt. Anger, insult, and exclusion gain ethical weight because they undermine the community the Torah seeks to protect. The same dynamic appears when the commandment against adultery is lifted from a legal boundary into a question of responsibility, power, and integrity. Yeshua shifts attention from external compliance to internal orientation. This does not mean that he introduces a harsher law meant to burden human life. Rather, he reveals that the Torah has always been about more than minimum requirements. The Torah is not satisfied with people merely staying just inside the lines. Its aim is to shape character, discernment, and moral maturity. Yeshua gives voice to what was already present, but often left unspoken. This is especially evident in his teaching on retaliation. The principle of eye for eye originally served as a standard of justice, meant to limit revenge and prevent escalation. Yeshua carries this principle further by exposing how even justified retaliation can trap people in cycles of violence. When he speaks of turning the other cheek, he is not promoting passivity or submission, but pointing toward a way of breaking patterns that perpetuate injustice. Once again, the movement is from letter to intention. Read this way, Yeshua stands firmly within the Jewish conversation of his time. He is not alone in emphasizing intention, mercy, and the value of life. The prophets had already criticized a form of law observance that lacked justice and care for the vulnerable. Rabbinic tradition developed extensive reflections on how the commandments should be applied with wisdom and humanity. Yeshua belongs to this stream, though his voice is unusually clear and uncompromising. A key point in this reflection is therefore to challenge the common idea that Yeshua sets grace against law. This opposition becomes prominent only in later Christian theology. In Jewish understanding, the Torah itself is an expression of grace. It is given so that people may live well together, not to crush them under unbearable burdens. When Yeshua criticizes certain interpretations of the law, it is precisely because they have lost this life-giving purpose. This is particularly evident in his confrontations with religious authorities. His critique is not directed at the Torah itself, but at a practice in which the law becomes a weapon, a tool for social control or moral superiority. When the commandments are severed from mercy and responsibility, they lose their meaning. Yeshua calls people back to the heart of the matter: justice, compassion, and faithfulness. When he summarizes the entire Torah as love for God and love for neighbor, this is not a simplification that dissolves the commandments into something vague. It is a prioritization that gives direction. Love does not replace the commandments, it becomes the space within which they are interpreted. Every commandment must be measured against the question: does this serve life, community, and human dignity? This perspective also reshapes the concept of obedience. Yeshua does not promote blind submission, but responsible discernment. He appeals to the human capacity to judge wisely and to take ethical responsibility in concrete situations. This is why he so often teaches through images, parables, and questions. He does not create a new code of rules, but forms a way of seeing and acting. In this sense, Yeshua deepens the Torah by making it more demanding on one level and more freeing on another. More demanding because it cannot be reduced to outward correctness. More freeing because it can no longer be applied mechanically or without reflection. The human being is not sidelined, but drawn into a mature relationship with the commandments. This also explains why the contrast between law and spirit is often misleading. For Yeshua, the spirit is not an escape from concrete life, but the very breath that gives the law its vitality. The spirit enables people to live the Torah from within, not as coercion, but as responsibility. When this way of reading Yeshua is taken seriously, the image of him as the founder of a new religion detached from Judaism begins to dissolve. Instead, he appears as a Jewish teacher who takes the Torah profoundly seriously and insists that it must shape the whole person. It is only later, when the movement around him becomes detached from its Jewish context, that the law comes to be seen as something from which one must be liberated. This reflection therefore invites us to rethink the relationship between Yeshua and the Torah, not as opposites, but as a continuity in which intention, life, and responsibility stand at the center. The Torah does not disappear. It is read in a way that demands more of the human being, not less. We can say this: Yeshua does not ask people to choose between law and grace. He calls them to go deeper into what has always been the purpose of the Torah, to live in such a way that God is honored through justice and the neighbor is protected through compassion. The Torah remains. The question is not whether it applies, but how it is lived. One statement from Yeshua deserves particular attention in this context: "Be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect." This saying has often been read as an impossible demand, a standard meant to expose human failure and drive people toward the need for substitutionary atonement. But there is little indication that Yeshua himself understood it this way. Within a Torah-centered framework, this call to perfection does not describe flawlessness or moral impossibility. It speaks instead of wholeness, integrity, and completeness of orientation. To be perfect is to be undivided, to live with coherence between inner intention and outward action. In this sense, Yeshua does not portray the Torah as an unlivable burden. On the contrary, he treats it as something that can be lived, internalized, and embodied. This stands in noticeable tension with later interpretations, particularly those associated with Paul, where the Torah is sometimes described as exposing sin without providing the capacity to overcome it. Yeshua does not frame the Torah as a system designed to fail. He does not suggest that obedience is inherently impossible, nor does he argue that human beings are incapable of living in alignment with God's will apart from a later theological mechanism. Equally striking is what Yeshua does not emphasize. He does not place substitutionary atonement at the center of his teaching. He does not tell his listeners that their primary need is someone to die in their place. Instead, his focus remains consistently on how people live, how they treat one another, how they order their desires, how they practice justice, mercy, and faithfulness in concrete, everyday life. Sin, in Yeshua's teaching, is not an abstract legal condition requiring metaphysical resolution. It is relational and ethical, something that must be addressed through repentance, reconciliation, and a transformed way of living. Forgiveness is real and available, but it is inseparable from change of direction. The call is not to believe something about a mechanism of salvation, but to walk a path shaped by the Torah, both inwardly and outwardly. Seen this way, the Torah is neither abolished nor declared impossible. It is intensified, internalized, and humanized. Yeshua calls people to live the Torah fully, not merely in action, but in intention, desire, and responsibility. The goal is not legal perfection, but a life aligned with the character of God. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you found this reflection meaningful, consider subscribing to the channel. You're welcome to like and share this episode so others can join the conversation. Your support helps keep these reflections going and makes them available to more listeners. May you walk in wisdom, grow in discernment, and live with compassion toward others. Peace and blessings to you all.